Compelling stories are not hard to find. You just need to know where to look. Join your host, Dr. Eric Shaw, prosecutor Ryan Frank, writer Adrian Bonenberger, and comedian Ryan Connor as they interview ordinary people about their extraordinary experiences. This is Baggage.
Well, welcome to Baggage. I'm prosecutor Ryan Frank, and with me again is Dr. Eric Shaw and comedian Ryan Connor. Adrian could not join us for this episode. A little behind the scenes, we all have full-time jobs, and we all have our hands in a bunch of stuff and family life and all that too. So not every episode is everyone going to be here, but Adrian is not here for a very good reason. He is launching today American Veterans for Ukraine in D.C. It's his little pet project with some other veterans, and that's launching today. So very good cause. We'll plug it at the end. Ryan and Eric, how you guys doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm tired. I got 2 kids and I'm tired all the time.
I'm
Thanks
exhausted,
for asking,
man.
Eric, how you doing, man?
Getting by. Same deal. Always a little bit tired, but
what an exciting start to
I know.
this podcast.
I know.
We're
Today,
all exhausted.
I've had like a whole week of meetings and doctors. It's been awful, but this is the.
Are you feeling all right?
No, I feel fine. It's just dumb stuff. It's like I have to go to my allergist normally once a month. Now I have to go every week for a month. And then today a GI doctor who said you got to check with your allergist on this because I think this is actually just another allergy instead of EOE.
At what age do you figure out all of your allergies? Like I got it now. I figured I know what they are.
it can evolve. You can develop new ones.
Oh yeah, I guess you're a doctor. Yeah. What? Yeah. I was looking at Ryan.
I was like, why is that my question? I had no allergies until I was an adult, and then suddenly I had a shit ton of them, and then some of them have completely gone away as I've been on shots, and some of them have just lessened, and then some of them have not changed at all.
I remember you did that spoonful of honey, raw honey thing. That worked for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, right? But it's a short-term fix, and it doesn't really handle anything severe. It was just so that I could eat a pear if it was super ripe. That's the only thing it really did for me. and it helped the sniffles.
The honey thing is one of those like hopefully optimistic things that everyone wanted to work, and it doesn't work. Like the thought was that if you're ingesting all the like minor pollens and stuff, that your body would react differently to it. And maybe if you do that from like day one as an infant, it might work, but like as an adult, it doesn't do anything. Tastes good.
All right. Well, this has been Allergy Corner, so we're going to get to the episode now. And I'm excited about this episode because for the last few months, it's been just a lot of, death. And this is kind of a nice change of pace where this episode, we're going to have Kate on. And Kate is a 17-year educator. She spent 9 years teaching in the classroom, kindergarten for the first year. And then after that, another 8 years of first grade. And then she became an instructional coach for 5 years. We'll ask her about that. And for the last 3 years, she's been an assistant principal. She has a bachelor's in early childhood education, a master's degree in educational psychology, and a grad certificate in educational leadership and administration. So welcome to the podcast, Kate.
Thank you, everybody. I'm happy to be here and happy to maybe be the first woman, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I guess so. That is true. You are the first woman on the podcast. And I would say the first
guest under 75 years old. First guest under 75.
That's true. Also true.
I'm 74. So
first non-Vietnam vet guest.
Excellent.
First guest who's not a father.
Yes.
Yes. Wow. I'm checking all the boxes.
Or related to anybody on this podcast. Yeah.
Okay. I'm checking all the boxes here. That's awesome.
But what I'm excited about this episode is everyone thinks of teacher, elementary school kids. We respect teachers. We're still not going to pay them what they deserve, but we respect them and they're hardworking, and it's got to be a tough job. But I expect we're going to hear there's another level to that. So let's start with, how did you get into education? Did you always know you wanted to be an educator?
I did not always know I wanted to be an educator. I have teachers at my school, and I've worked with teachers who are like, I used to play teacher in my basement, and I was a teacher and my siblings were the kids. I was not that. My sister and I actually made a restaurant in our basement, and we were waitresses. So I did not have education on my mind, but I did know that I wanted to work with children. I've always loved children, and I have a passion in psychology. So when I was in high school, I got to do an internship. And because I was supposed to be going into my undergrad for child psychology, I went to one internship at the high school with my with the school psychologist there, and then I went to a private residential home and got some internship experience there. Neither one of those things really wowed me, but I still really was interested in psychology. But my internship teacher said, you would be a great kindergarten teacher. Can you just do one more internship and I'm going to put you with a kindergarten teacher. So I said yes. And my first day I sat down and there was a little boy struggling with something. And I sat down and I taught him, I don't even remember what it was, but I taught him something. And I saw like my first light bulb moment in a child. And that was like it. Like that day I went home and told my parents I was going to change my my major in undergrad to early childhood education.
And then it's been sunshine and roses since then.
Sunshine and roses. Especially being an assistant principal, I never have any hard days or any drama ever. No.
Well, that's the podcast.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
How do you feel when I don't know, Ryan mentioned something about teachers being underpaid. How do teachers generally feel when there's like some motion and there's going to be more funding for schools, and instead of it being raises for teachers, it's like, we're going to buy you 7,000 iPads?
There's a lot of money in education, especially if you work in a Title I school, which I do. And there's a lot of stuff in schools that cost a lot of money that are not being used. And it's a giant waste of money. And I think that's sometimes it's like a slap in the face to teachers, because that money could be reallocated to teachers' salaries. And just like everyone, like Ryan said, everyone says how much they respect teachers, and most teachers have their masters. I grew up in New York, and in order to be a teacher, within 5 years, you have to have your master's. So, and some teachers have their doctorate, and it's not looked at in the same way as maybe other fields where they're paid more money. So yeah, I think sometimes teachers feel like it's a slap in the face when money's being thrown around, but it's not going towards the teachers.
Yeah, it seems crazy. My mom and stepdad were in the school system my whole life, and it was always wild when I would stop by my mom's school, and you just see all these crazy gadgets that cost tens of thousands of dollars, and then the teachers have to buy tissues for the students. It's like,
yes.
Whoa, how is this happening? But
yes.
Anyway,
recently, especially COVID kind of brought it out, some of the struggles that teachers go through. And I'm not necessarily trying to get into COVID conversation, but even before that, when in your career, if ever, did you say, wait a second, this is a little heavier than just having light bulb moments one after another and go home and I sleep great? Like, did you ever reach a point where you started saying this is going to be some challenging moments here?
So truly and deeply like questioning if this is what I wanted to do, there's been 2 times in 17 years. The first time was my first year teaching, and I was having a lot of anxiety for the first time in my life, like worse than just your typical Sunday scaries, but like really having a lot of anxiety. And my mom said to me, "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" And that was like a challenge in me. And I was like, yep, it is. So I like doubled down. And then 5 years later, I won Teacher of the Year for my school. And I knew that this is what I wanted to do, but it was almost, and maybe my mom even said that on purpose, but I think I just needed to like get out of my head a little bit and remember why I was there. And then the second time was last week. Last week was a lot. Yeah, because we've just been experiencing a lot of really hard things. When I say we, I mean my principal, and there's another assistant principal. We have been having to make really hard decisions and dealing with really trauma-filled experiences. And for the first time since my first year, I was like, can I keep doing this? Is this something that I can every single day? If every single day was like today, could I do that every single day? And so thankfully I've moved through that. But yeah, there's some really hard things. And my first year being an assistant principal, the first like 2 days were incredibly hard, the first 2 days of school. And I called my mom, who was a leader in her own field, and I was crying and I was like, this happened and this happened. And she was just like, well, now you know how to do those. I was like, wait, what? She's like, well, now you know how to handle those things. And so from then on, I try to reframe things to be like, okay, so that happened. That didn't feel great. It wasn't, maybe I wish I would have done something different way, but now I know if that ever happens again, how to handle it. So that's helped me to reframe things.
So let me ask you this: when that first thing happens on the first 2 days, do you view that would it be as stressful now, or was it just the newness of teaching made it that difficult?
My first year teaching?
Yes.
Oh no, I would not feel as stressed now. Because when I first started teaching, I was 21 years old because I have a late birthday. So I was 21 years old in charge of 24 5-year-olds. And when you think about that, like sometimes many people when they're 21 should not even be around 5-year-olds. And I was in charge of them. So I think that got to me. And I think this has happened even more so since becoming a mom, but these are people's babies. Like people stayed up with them all night long. They like rocked them to sleep. That one of my favorite sayings is every person in your class is someone's whole world. And so that's like that weighed, I think that weighed really heavily on me. And I didn't know yet that 99% of parents, as long as they know that you care about their child and that all you want is the best for them, they're on board with you. 99% of parents. They may show it in different ways, but I think part of that was like parents maybe pushing a little harder because I was 21 and I was in charge of their baby. So I think like looking back, that's nothing compared to the things that I deal with every day. But in that moment, it was really hard.
Is your school K through 5?
Yes, K through 5, yes.
So that first, what did you say? Your first couple days, you questioned it when you called your mom.
Yes. So in the first 2 days of school, as me being an assistant principal, like first 2 days that the kids were there, a student with autism was dropped off at the wrong bus stop, and they couldn't find him. And then that was the first day of school, and then the next day, I got a call over our walkie-talkie. They needed an administrator down to room whatever. And so now I approach things much differently, but when you hear like someone frantic over the radio, like we need an administrator right now, you run there and you don't know what you're gonna get into. I figured it was something student related. When I walked in, one of our counselors was having a seizure on the floor, and I was the first, besides the person that was with her, I was the first to get there. So I called the nurse, and I just knew, and correct me, hopefully I did. Hopefully Eric, the doctor, doesn't correct me, but I knew that I should like tip her over or just on her side. So then the nurse came, and she just asked me to kind of like straddle her body while she's actively seizing. And so her face, this counselor's face, is forever stamped on my brain because I had never seen anyone having a seizure before. And when I'm like standing over her while the nurse is calling 911 and doing all that, that was really hard. So after that, I called my mom. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But she reassured me. And since then, we've had other medical emergencies and plenty of times where I've needed to come to support a child in crisis. And I now know unless a child is like in imminent danger, I don't run there. I walk quickly, but I've learned that if I'm the one who's coming to help, I need to be in a good state of mind. And just automatically when you start running, you just like, if you show up running, you're already like dysregulated a little bit. So unless it's like super serious, I always just walk there so that I can kind of maintain my composure so that I'm the one coming in regulated in a very dysregulated environment.
That's very self-aware. Is that part of training, or just something you realized that you needed to be the calm person in the room?
It's part of therapy that, that is part of therapy. But I think I'm a really reflective person, and and sometimes to a fault where I overthink things, but I've had enough experiences where I've said, you know what, how could I do that better next time? And last year, a student tried, he started to elope, which is a nice word for saying run. We say elope in education because it sounds better than run away. So he took off, and like before I could even think, I just started to run, and I put my arm out to stop him, but he like kind of juked, and I didn't, and I went head first into the wall in front of me and got a concussion.
Ooh.
I had to go to the emergency room. And so after that, I was like, what did I need to do differently in that? Because my instinct was to protect that child, but in the right mind, I'm like, he could have run, but he was not near an outside door. Like someone else would have stopped him. It's just in that moment, I wasn't tuned enough. And so now I've had a lot of time to just like take a pause, take a breath, and before I act.
What would you do if a student, let's just say hypothetically a second grader, goes to the bathroom and then they can't get their zipper back up, so they freak out thinking I can't go back to class with my zipper down, and they lock themselves in the bathroom for 2 hours.
This sounds like you know someone that this happened to?
Yeah, it's happened to my girlfriend. Locked herself in the bathroom for 2 hours in elementary school, and she's like, everyone's trying to get in, and she's like, no, I'm fine.
So did her teacher know she was in there?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Everyone was like, we're trying to get the door open. She's like, it won't open. But really, she was just afraid because her zipper wouldn't.
So
that would scar me.
Right. So
I can't imagine being the adults on the other side of that door.
How did she get out?
I don't remember. I think eventually someone talked her into opening it or something. But
yeah.
It just blew my mind when she told me that. I was like, I cannot imagine. I would just go back with, I don't know. But I guess some kids have this weird thing about underwear. I have learned that they don't want other kids to know that they have underwear. Although it would be weird if they didn't.
That's way too embarrassing. No.
Yeah.
I have had students who have to strip down if they have to poop. And their parents have told me, and like, the door is closed. You do what you need to do. But our
friend Glenn still does that.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not going to bleep that. I'm going to leave that in.
You're going to leave that in.
He's proud of it too.
Yeah, he'll say that.
One of the students, like, I don't know how, but one of our very like uptight book buddies she's like retired and she does this to help children. She walked by the bathroom and could see like his pants on the ground. She came running to me. She's like, he's naked in there. I was like, oh no, he's just pooping. It's okay. I know all about it. It's fine. Yes. Kids are just weird. They're weird.
So I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because we, as a pediatrician, we kind of travel in similar circles, I imagine.
Yeah.
And although everyone thinks like, oh yeah, you work with kids. Yes, on the surface you do, but you're still mostly working with their parents. And I imagine, like, particularly in medicine, as I'm sure you get in teaching, there are interesting viewpoints. And I'd just love to hear if you had a story or two that you could share of just something that was so out of left field that took you back, where you're like, I didn't even think of that as an option to the question I asked or to the situation that we're in, where you just were speechless by their suggestion.
Well, one time I was speechless when a parent handed me a prescription paper that a doctor had written, please give this child an IEP, on his prescription pad. And an IEP is an individualized education program for students with special ed. And I was like, well, that's not really a prescription. That's an educational thing. So that shocked me a little bit, that the parent then expected us to just write an IEP there. But something that I heard recently, is a first grader who refuses to eat anything at home except for milk out of her bottle as a first grader. But she comes to school every day and eats and drinks like every other child. But because boundaries are hard and saying no is hard, it's just easier for her parents to give her a bottle every day. And so we tried to explain like how unhealthy that is on so many different levels. But the parents are going through a divorce, and now it's like no one wants to be the bad guy. So I often tell parents it's a lot easier to say no to a 6-year-old than a 16-year-old. So if you don't start saying no now, it's going to be a lot harder down the road.
I was a substitute teacher for a while, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you one when I was an elementary strings teacher. And so these were 5th graders. And this one kid, she swung. This is like when right before we started, everyone's supposed to just be getting out their violin. At that age, you don't even want them to try to tune it because they can't tell. They don't even know what they're hearing. And this girl swings her violin. I see her swing it, hits another kid. It's an accident, but she broke the bridge on it. And then she comes to me and says, so-and-so just kicked my violin and broke the bridge. Mm-hmm. And I said, are you sure that's what happened? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, I saw you swing it and it hit him while he was standing there. Mm-hmm. And she said, no, he came up and kicked it. And I said, I saw you swing it. And I was like, don't worry about it. We'll get this fixed. But, I think you should probably say you're sorry for hitting him with your violin, right? And we'll talk to your mom and we'll get you a new bridge and I'll put it on for you and it'll be okay. It's not a big deal. And now we know not to swing our violin. Thought that was it, right? The next day, the principal calls me in the office and she was like, so this kid's mom called today and said, where does this strings teacher get off telling my daughter to take responsibility for her actions?
How dare he say that?
And How dare he say that? At first, I was like, wait a minute, am I getting in trouble for this? And the principal said, I just want you to know what some parents will say to you in this role.
Yes, that reminded me of something that happened recently. A 2nd grader told her teacher she needed to use the bathroom. They were waiting in line to get school photos. The teacher was like, can you just wait a couple minutes? We're almost done. The 2nd grader ends up pooping her pants, but no one knows. She goes to the teacher just thinks she peed. She goes to the nurse, she changes, and mom picks her up. So the mom comes in a couple days later. The student had been absent all these days. And the mom comes in and says, I would like for you to have my daughter transferred to another school. And I was like, what? She was like, she couldn't possibly come back. She's way too embarrassed. And I was like, ma'am, I think this is a great opportunity for us to teach her. She can do hard things. There's going to be a lot more embarrassing things that happen in her life. She's got to push through this. The mom starts crying and she was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just homeschool her. And I was like, no, that's not the answer.
Pooping?
Yes. And no one even saw it. No one even knew. She was like, I just can't bear to. I said, it was the day before spring break too. And I said, this is like a beautiful time for this to happen. By the time she gets back, no one will even remember.
It's a beautiful time to poop your pants.
Beautiful time to poop your pants. So she left crying and the girl came back after spring break and everything was totally fine. But I was like, sometimes I feel like parents are so afraid to like allow their kids to feel emotions and just be okay with that she's like, I have to fix this. I have to just remove her from this setting so she doesn't have to feel any shame. Like, she's going to feel shame in her life and that's okay. We just have to help her work through that shame.
I mean, probably a quarter of the kids in any school have pooped their pants at school.
Yes, that's what I try to tell them on too. Yes.
Dude, my friend, I shouldn't say the name, My friend's kid, he was in kindergarten last year, and he would poop his pants a few times a week. He just couldn't control it, and to the point where the teacher yelled at him and brought in and yelled at him about teach your son. And he's like, he's 5, and sometimes this happens with 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
And guess what's going to make it happen again?
Yeah,
yelling
exactly.
at them and
Yelling,
shaming them for
him.
doing it, you moron.
Yeah. So anyway, he doesn't do it anymore. But yeah, I mean, kids poop their pants.
On the level of just the way the parents react, I can't believe someone got funding for this, but there was a study a while back that looked at who would have thought anxious parents have anxious children. And what they found was that there's obviously a genetic component to it. You know, apples don't fall far from trees. But there's a nature and nurture aspect to it. What they found with the anxious parent was they see something that is making the kid anxious. And what you're normally supposed to, like, the average person would be like, oh, that's making a little uncomfortable. Let's see what happens. Like you're talking about, like, you know, kind of like confronting these things and building, you know, strength and saying, hey, we should kind of like push forward. And that's what actually, like, when you do cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety, it's usually this like, well, how did that make you feel? Well, what did we do about it? And how do we kind of move forward with that? But with anxious parents, they go, no, don't do that. And so they actually pull the kid in closer and avoid the things that make them anxious. And so no one is ever challenged. And so the anxious parent creates a more anxious kid.
Yes, I see. I work with a lot of those anxious kids, and then I meet their parents. I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
This makes sense. With the pooping frequently, I had a first grader who was similar thing. He would just have accidents, and we were trying to work out, like, medically, is there something wrong? You know, whatever. So one day, a different parent came in. He after school, he was like, hey, my daughter forgot her notebook. Can we look around for it? And so I said, well, maybe it slipped behind the bookshelf. So I moved the dad helped me move the bookshelf. There were like 12 bags of poopy underwear that this kid was hiding from his parents. And I had no idea. So he didn't want to bring the dirty underwear home. So he would just take it and put it behind the bookshelf, like slide it down there. And I'm looking at this dad. And he was like, are those what I think they are? Yeah. If you think that they are underwear with poop on them, then yes, you are correct. Yeah.
Oh, God.
My first thought is, how wealthy is this family? How many pairs of underwear do they have for their kid?
Same thing.
If my kid's missing 12 pairs of underwear, I'd be like,
where's all
buddy, is
of
somebody
your
taking your
underwear?
underwear at school? Like, where's all your underwear?
I know. I thought the same.
Oh, that poor kid. That's that poor kid.
He did work through it, and we got better, and he wasn't hiding them anymore, and it was becoming a lot less frequent, so it was good. But I was like mortified because it was someone else's parent, and he was like, what is that?
And it's a cycle with the parents too, because we struggled with my oldest. We struggled with the potty training a little bit. He had some trouble, and I'm sure we just fed into it and probably prolonged it by our responses sometimes. Not shaming or anything like that, but you know, definitely kids can read your reaction, and I just carried a lot of I don't know about guilt, but a lot of like, man, what are we doing wrong and all that. And then I think somebody told me, like, look, he's going to go to college and he's going to be fine.
Yes.
Like, this is not. This
it
is
won't
a
be on his
temporary
resume.
thing.
He won't.
It might have been you, Eric. It was probably you. It was like, look, he's not going to go to high school or college with these problems. He's a kid. He's going to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll grow out of it. Yes.
Not that this episode's about kids pooping their pants, but I got a pretty funny one about a kid pooping his pants. It's a friend.
That's
Eric,
all right. We're 30 minutes. It's about 30 minutes of poop stories. Keep
Eric,
going.
I don't know if you know him, Ryan. You know him, Rory Scovel. And I can tell the story because he does it online. I can say his name. But when he was in, I think it was 4th grade or 3rd grade, he's going to a party at a friend's house. They stop. His stepmom is driving, and they stop at this video store on the way. While they went inside, he thought he had to fart, shit his pants. He didn't want to say anything. He gets to this friend's house for this party, and he goes upstairs to the bathroom, and it was one of those trash cans where there's no bag liner, and it's really small, and there was nothing in it. So he's like, I can't put my underwear in there after cleaning himself up, and then so he pokes his head out the door. No one else is upstairs. He throws the underwear behind his friend's sister's bed, between the bed and the wall. and he's thinking this isn't going to be found for a few days, and then it could have been anyone at the party. Then the next morning, he's getting ready for school, and as he's putting his underwear on, he sees that his name is in his waistband.
Oh
No. Oh, no. Oh, embarrassing.
And then he moved states.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah,
do
he
I see
just
him
he
again.
embraced it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it could go two ways. You could be the guy that's like, and what?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
what?
Right.
What else
This
am I
is what
capable
I
of?
do.
You got, yeah.
That psychopath.
I have poop stories for days, but we can move on to a different story, a different topic.
Well, I was actually going to ask you. So you're teaching kindergarten, and you're doing first grade,
Mhm.
and then you said you moved into instructional coaching. Was that for a break for teaching, or was it a career? Trying to climb the ladder situation. What was the reason for that change?
A little bit of both. My 9th year of teaching was my hardest in terms of students' behaviors in my classes, just like really challenging behaviors. And so this position opened up in my school, and I thought, that would be like something different. I'm not ready to leave education, but I think maybe I just need something different. And then also I get to work with teachers and have an impact in a different way, and hopefully impacting more children because I'm working with the teachers. So that I was an instructional coach for 5 years, and people had said like along my career that I should be an administrator, and I was always like, ugh, yuck, never. I would never do that. And then once I became an instructional coach and I was coaching some teachers who should not be teachers, it hit me like, wait a minute. I can't work alongside teachers who don't want to be there for the rest of my career. Just like those kids deserve a teacher who wants to be there and who loves them and wants them to grow, that teacher deserves to do something that he or she likes to do and like makes them feel like you're obviously miserable in this career. So that was kind of the tipping point for me where I was like, if I can help teachers get better or kids get better teachers and teachers find a different path if that's what works for them, I want to do that. So that's when I went back to school to get my postmaster's certificate in educational leadership and administration.
I think everyone remembers back from being a kid, a teacher that just didn't want to be a teacher, that was just miserable and hated kids and made their lives miserable.
And it's a really hard job when you love doing it. I can't even imagine how hard it is when you hate doing it.
Yeah, I don't understand how you fall into it if you hate it. I get people who are like, yeah, I'm a banker, but I hate it, but I'm rich.
Right.
But it's like, why are you going to put yourself through that being a teacher? It's so difficult if you don't love it.
Ryan, do you remember the government teacher in our high school? Great big older guy that was just absolutely miserable and hated everybody. I think he was right.
Government teacher?
Yeah.
I remember the what was she? She was English teacher or whatever.
I think his classroom was right next to hers. He made everyone's lives miserable. And I remember once, like, he just couldn't accept that I was doing well in the class. And I would frequently like fall asleep or forget my book. And he gave me a detention once for forgetting my book. This is a senior. I was either a junior or senior. Yeah, I was a senior. And I was like, you can't do this. Like, I'm getting an A+ in your class. I have the highest grade in this entire room. And he's like, you need to learn discipline. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Do you remember Chris Carrieri?
Not yet.
He ripped him a new asshole, and it was the most amazing thing. I've never seen a kid
Is he a soccer player?
An adult like this. Yeah.
I played against him.
Did you?
Yeah.
He was a.
When did you play against him?
Yeah, he was All-American. Yeah.
Yeah, he got a full scholarship to UNC. He got into Major League Soccer, all that sort of stuff. But he stood up. This guy had just given him so much grief. But anyways, he got up and he was just like, I'm going places. Like, I've got this full ride. I'm doing all this. What are you doing? You're sitting here in this classroom, like hating life. He's like, I'm better than you in every way, basically. And everyone in the classroom was just like, people were like clapping, and pretty sure he got suspended for that. But it was amazing to see.
Yeah, that'll do it.
As a teacher, you're probably just like, that's awful.
It reminded me when I was in high school, I got needs to learn self-discipline on my report card. And I was like a really good, quiet student until about fourth grade when I realized I knew how to make people laugh. And then it was just like downhill from there. And but now as a teacher and as an administrator, I feel like that made me a better educator because I understand a little bit why the kids' behaviors are like that. If you've been a perfect student your whole life, sometimes it's really hard for a teacher to understand, like, why is this student doing this? And I'm like, well, he's bored, or he doesn't respect you, or you're not engaging, or like let me just list all the reasons why his behavior is like that. So that just reminded me that yeah, my mom and dad were like, what is this? Needs to learn self-discipline? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I'm working on it. I'm working on my self-discipline.
Don't worry about me. I'm 9. I'll figure it out. Yeah.
Right.
I want to hear, sorry to interrupt you. I want to hear more of this. That's interesting. I wanted to hear more about your transition from educator into administrator, because that's not one that everybody goes down that path. It's almost a kind of apples to oranges comparison there. I was, please expand on that.
Yes. Forgive me. Do you know like the it's a research around people rising to their highest level of incompetence, and like people are like, you're a great teacher, you should be an instructional coach, but those are two different jobs. You're a great instructional coach, so you should be an administrator, but those are two different jobs. You're a great assistant principal, you should be a principal, two different jobs. So there are times when I realize that being an administrator, some of that is not in my wheelhouse. Those are things like skills I had to learn because I knew instruction. I know how to manage a classroom. I know how to support teachers in terms of instruction. But then there's like parts of administration that a teacher or an instructional coach never sees. So like working with the budget, dealing with irate parents, like, so though that has been an interesting shift because I went from a place where I felt like pretty confident after being either a teacher or a coach for 14 years to a place that was like, oh, well, this is a skill that I don't really have yet. And that's because it's not some of these things a teacher will never have to do. So yeah, it definitely was an adjustment. But when people ask me, like, would you ever go back to the classroom? I think my answer is no. I feel like I'm where I need to be now.
Well, I was going to ask about that too, because when you're in the classroom and you're dealing with these kids, you were saying, I'm going to rephrase it, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, they're not inherently jerks, right? There's usually a reason behind behavior that is, abnormal or something like that. And did you find yourself kind of figuring out why that was, maybe something at home? And I imagine sometimes feelings of frustration that you can't really address that issue sometimes.
That was what led to my feeling last week of I was in a very like hopeless feeling. I work at a school where 80% of the students are living below the poverty line. There 75% of students have a language other than English as their first language. We have like 30 different languages represented in my school. And sometimes with poverty comes trauma, especially when like we have a lot of refugees, and there's a lot of trauma there. And sometimes the parents don't even recognize that what they went through was trauma, or what their kids went through was trauma. There's a lot of generational trauma. So children of parents who hated school and never really felt validated in school, and those are kids of grandparents that hate, and trying to unpack all of the parts that make all of the baggage that each person comes with, and figuring out what role does the school actually play, because sometimes it feels like the school is where people turn to for everything. You don't have clothes, go to the school will provide you clothes. You don't you can't afford to have your child go to the doctor, just send them to the nurse, she'll figure it out. Like, you need housing, go to the school, we'll help, we'll have our family liaison work with you. So sometimes it feels like everything or most things are falling on the schools. And when there's so many different parts, we only have kids for 6-7 hours, and then they go home, sometimes to homes that are really, really toxic, and they don't eat when they're at home, and they're abused verbally, emotionally, physically, and then they come back the next day, and it's like we start over again, and we have to show like kids that it's okay to be angry. That's like one of the biggest things when I started, when kids would come to my office for behavior issues, I would always ask them, is it okay to be angry? And so many of them said no. I was like, it is definitely okay to be angry. Everyone gets angry. What's not okay is hitting someone when you're angry, or cursing someone out because you're angry, or slapping someone because you're angry. But it's okay to be angry. But if they go home to a home where they can't have any feelings, they're not allowed to have those, or they're neglected, or a number of things, sometimes it feels like you're hitting your head against a wall, or you're like on a hamster wheel, and you feel like you're not making as much progress as you want to, because home is really hard.
Do you ever struggle with, well, sometimes probably your legal requirement to intervene, but also when it's borderline, like, because sometimes teachers and administrators might be in a position of trust with the kid.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever struggle with taking a step that's an option to you, being calling CPS or calling law enforcement or something like that, and struggling with, do I make that call or not? What's in their best interest?
Yeah, I'm going through, without giving too many details, I'm going through something right now where a student made a really significant threat towards their teacher, and the threat could be carried out given the background.
Mhm.
And so we had to report this to safety and I had to do a threat assessment. We had to report this to safety and security. They reach out to the police, and the teacher is now pressing charges. And I had to be in a disciplinary hearing today with the student, where I had to say like what happened, and it was really hard, because at the end of the day, he's in elementary school,
Mhm.
and I have a duty to keep everyone safe, and what he said does not make people feel safe. And also, I know what he goes home to every day, and I just like want to give him a hug. And so it's like, I'm sure he's really mad at me, and he's allowed to be mad at me, but then you're like, but in the end, like, this is my job. I have to do, if I didn't do all these steps, I would get fired. Someone could get really hurt. So
Mhm.
that's really hard. CPS cases too, having to call, and then if CPS takes the case and they go over to the parent knows it came from the school, so they don't know who did it, but like they always know. So parents coming and just yelling about, being so defensive about what they're saying is not happening. But at the end of the day, like, my job is to keep that child safe, and I'm a mandated reporter, so you can be really angry at me, and also it's my job.
Yeah, I've a number of the cases I prosecute come from, told a friend yesterday, I had a jury trial yesterday, told a friend at school, that friend, told her mom reported it. More often it's told counselor, or told a friend, who then told the school resource officer
Mhm.
or whatever. So the school is the genesis for things coming out that the families did not ever want to come out publicly.
Yep.
So now there's a distrust of the schools or the source that ended up disclosing it. And, that's now a resource that's not available to them. I was also going to say, it seems to me, I've been prosecuting for 12 years now, always involving juveniles. And I never saw, I live in a little microcosm world, but I never saw a kid with an actual firearm,
Mhm.
like that was ever an issue, until probably 6 years ago. And now it's not just firearms, but like violence at a younger age,
Mhm.
assaults, threats, um, the advent of social media, the things that little kids, elementary school, less elementary, more middle school kids are saying is super concerning. You've been doing this for 20 or for 17 years. Have you seen an escalation of concerning behavior.
100%. And then if you
You
think
attribute
about
that to social media, or a lot of it at least.
social media and the pandemic really didn't help in the sense that some of the students just didn't socialize enough. So then when they came back to school, like we had kids coming to kindergarten who had never been around another child before. So they're 5 years old and they've never interacted with another child. So we're like, hi, this is a child. This is how we speak to. So we have that. And then also anxiety and depression that their parents experienced through the pandemic that inevitably had an impact on those kids. And then in social media, social media is slowly ruining our children. Like I don't want to like bash all social media, but especially with girls.
Follow me at Ryan Connor Comedy
Sorry.
on Instagram.
Some social media is great. When you're a 9-year-old girl and they're roasting you on social media, or they're posting inappropriate pictures, or it is like the level of impact that is having, especially from what I see, especially on girls and their self-esteem and what they're wearing or not wearing, and I'm friends with you now, I hate you later. That has just been amplified by social media, because now we have, my principal calls it Twitter fingers, where you could just like say whatever you want behind, because you're instead of having to say that to a person now, you can just type it on your phone or type it on your computer, and you don't really have to deal
You don't
with
even have
the
to have your
impact of that.
face and name behind it. It can even be anonymous. Only the person who's being attacked knows who it is, and then their shield. My niece is she's going through some serious like mental health issues. She's in 11th grade, and it seems like it's all social media. 3 kids in her class have committed suicide in the last month.
Holy cow!
It's insane. It's it's absolutely, it's terrifying. It's insane. I also wonder if like, not even before social media, how much of this this tendency to lash out as the first resort, these things like this that come from I think before social media you have a change in TV programming for kids, right? From what I've seen, Bluey is the only program that's popular that's actually about instilling these great values and understanding yourself and loving your family and loving others and things like that. And everything else is boom, 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 boom. And even if it's not like violent or negative, everything is hyperactive. Everything is always this is my brother's observation who has 3 kids. He's like, we're talking about like we grew up loving Mr. Rogers, and just you think of Mr. Rogers start the show. He comes in, slowly takes off, changes his jacket, slowly changes his shoes, feeds the fish, and then he's like, "It's okay if you're angry. It's what you do with the anger. Let's have a popsicle now." It's so soothing, and it's just sort of teaching you that you're okay, right? And then my brother says, then Mr. Rogers has not been on the air. There's Daniel Tiger, but it's not the same. And the other programs for kids, it's just flashing lights, and everything is just the way my brother says it, everything is at a 10. There's no just relax. There's none of that. And so then
and then there's Peppa Pig, which is just the worst of the worst shit possible.
I'm thankful 30 to have a boy who's not interested in Peppa Pig. I now take those children who have been placed in front of screens for 5 years, 6 years, with all of that overstimulation, and then put them in a classroom where they're expected to sit and listen to a teacher, even if it's just for 5 minutes. We're not asking 5-year-olds to sit there for an hour. I mean, it is impossible. No teacher can be as stimulating as some of these shows, some of these video games. My master's was in educational psychology, and my thesis was on a correlation between ADHD and the amount of screen time you watch. And there's obviously never going to be a study that's like, okay, you sit here and watch all of that, and we'll see if you get ADHD, or like. And there's like also the the chicken and the egg thing. Like, are children with ADHD, with their dopamine levels off, are they more drawn to things like that? Or do they, or because they're watching these overstimulating things, they then appear to have ADHD because they can't focus on anything, or they're hyperfixating on only that one? So that was really interesting. And now I just see it even more so because there's so much content for kids to watch. So much. Something that's like baffling to me. I was sitting in a meeting about a student, and the mom, she was saying that he's on a screen 4 hours every night. So if you think about going to school every day, you're at school, and then 4 hours out of the day you're on a screen at home. And so I just asked about, she had a 16-month-old too, and I asked if he is ever on the screen, and she's like, yeah, he usually watches it for like 1 or 2 hours. I was like, what?
Wow.
Like, that baby should not even be near a screen. And so and I'm a parent, so there are times when I'm like, I have to do this. I need you to go watch this show. Like, I totally get that. But sometimes it's like over relied on. And sometimes it's because maybe the parent is dealing with depression, and like they just can't do that. So there's like mental health aspects to it too. I don't think it's just social media. It's just like the overwhelming amount of content that's on screens right now that is, I think, is really hindering the lives of many kids.
Speaking of challenges, can you talk about, and I don't know if you were still in the teaching position or if you had already moved into the admin position, can you talk more about your time as an educator during the pandemic and COVID?
Yes, I was an instructional coach for most of it. And my first year as an assistant principal was the first year where we fully came back, but we're still wearing masks. And that I had a very warped sense of what an AP does my first year, because so much of it was like contact tracing and calling parents, there's a child that your child came into contact with, so you need to go. So much of our time was dedicated to dealing with all the effects of COVID that I didn't even understand really what my job was for the first 6 months or so. But then being an instructional coach during it, because I didn't have a class that I wasn't a teacher to a class, I just wanted to help teachers in whatever way I could. Like, whatever you need me to do that I can do virtually, you just tell me what to do. So just think about trying to get a student who doesn't speak English, let's say a 5-year-old who doesn't speak very much English, to get logged on to Zoom. Like, what does that even mean? What? So through a screen, it's not even like you're sitting next to me. I have to teach you through a screen. So I would take like pictures with my phone, and then I would turn it and see this, but then their Zoom looked different than my Zoom. Logins, like username and passwords, they don't know letters yet. And we're like, okay, press B. And they're like, I don't know what a B is. So that was really challenging. And I could not wait to get back into school, because I could just see the impacts of what it was doing. Kids that usually would be in a classroom and engaged somehow were sitting underneath a blanket, and you could tell they were watching TV, but their camera was just on. And I was just like watching children's brains get slightly ruined through this. Yeah, that was really hard.
Tie all this stuff together. My daughter has ADHD, and that first few months of like the COVID lockdown, and like everyone gave the schools the benefit of the doubt of just like, we're trying to make the best of a bad situation. Let's get this all together. But like once they had it all together with like, we're going to do, these online classrooms and have all these portals, and there was 5 different ways to log in and different programs to log into this and that. And my wife works from home, so she caught the brunt of it. And trying to deal with a child with ADHD on a screen who can barely sit still, even with her meds, it was a nightmare. Like, that was probably one of the hardest times in our life, like trying to muddle through all of that stuff, kind of collectively and as a family.
I believe it. And on the flip side, there were funny moments like a dad walking naked in the background, not realizing that his son's screen was on. Like there were some lighthearted moments too. And then you also got a little peek into into what home looks like. Some of them were like, "Oh, that explains." But yeah, it was a really hard time.
I frequently have to be on meetings like first thing in the morning, and they're all Zoom stuff. And I don't trust the mute button. I don't trust the camera off button. None of it. The phone is like camera down on the floor. Everything when I'm pooping in the morning.
I was gonna say, I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, right. Showering, getting ready, like, but particularly pooping. Like that camera is off.
This is a heavy poop episode.
How did we
did
get
not
back
think
to
it was gonna.
I don't know. I was gonna ask about standardized testing, and then.
Sorry.
Is there an issue in elementary schools still of having to teach toward the standardized tests and sort of sacrificing the curriculum, or is that something that's in the past?
So at least in where I am, the standards are very connected to the end of the year standardized testing. So what the teachers should be teaching is what's being assessed. I would never, like, if you were truly teaching the test in that you were like, okay, I looked through the blueprints from previous tests and I saw that there were 2 geometry questions. So I'm only going to spend a little bit of time with geometry, but there were 8 computations. So I'm going to do that. I mean, that I would say is teaching to the test. But I think if you are teaching the standards that your state says you should be teaching, hopefully students will do all right. And it's
gotcha. So is that an overstated problem, you think, or do you think it just varies from state to state? Because I've heard a lot of people talk about how the curriculum just gets hijacked,
or grade to grade.
Yeah,
Yeah, it could be. It's also like standardized testing is not the best way to measure people's abilities. And some kids know the content, but you put a test in front of them and they're going to bomb it for a number of different reasons. So
my daughter with ADHD has basically all A's and B's and bombs every standardized test she's ever taken.
Yeah.
She just doesn't have the bandwidth to sit still long enough to do it.
And that's why there's a lot of pushback against like teachers' raises or their evaluation tied to the standardized tests at the end of the year and how well their students do, is because there's so many variables there. Like, are there some pretty horrible teachers that get pretty horrible results? Probably. But there's also teachers who are working their asses off and the kids are working really hard, and it's just not a good measure of what they know. If they could do like a project, like project-based learning and show they're learning that way, that would be even better. But to make it standardized, make it easy to grade, easy to put into percentage, that's what they're going to do.
So I have a brief story, but then leads into kind of a question that ties in with that. When my daughter was in kindergarten, they were doing lockdown drills. And rather than tell kindergartners like the purpose behind this and why they were doing it, they told them that there were bears outside and that they had to kind of keep them safe from the bears, which is really cute unless your kid lives in Colorado and goes camping all the time, who's now scared shitless of bears.
Yes.
Because of this. And like whenever we do more remote camping, she has major problems because of what they did in kindergarten.
Did she go in lockdown drill mode and she's like, wait, I gotta protect us from the bear?
She thought bears were like in our neighborhood. That was the problem. She thought that bears were just ubiquitous in Colorado. So my follow-up is like, can you tell me, or just kind of you tell me your experiences or the way the culture has shifted with the concept of having to do lockdown drills after like Newtown, and particularly Newtown, but like Parkland, and what does that do to staff and how do kids kind of react to that? Can you just expand more on that?
Yes, a couple of years ago, my district adopted, I won't say the name of what that's, is there like trademark? I don't know. Can I say the name?
I can edit it out.
Okay.
If you don't.
So it's, is the school safety methodology. And it goes through like what lockdowns should look like, what evacuations should look like. And we were trained extensively on how to think on our feet. So it used to be like, if we were doing a lockdown, we put all of the kids in a corner and they all sit there. But then they threw horrible experiences, they've found that that is like shooting fish in a barrel, where you're putting all the kids in one spot. So the theory around the method is that like sometimes you would need to lock down, but sometimes you would need to evacuate, and sometimes you would need to barricade. So sometimes you'd have to block the door, because you have to be able to think what's the best way to handle this emergency situation. So the training started with them playing 911 calls from Columbine. So that was terrifying. And then it culminated by the trainers using Nerf guns to around the school. And then we had to like think on our feet, decide what we were going to do so that we didn't get hit by the Nerf guns.
Now, this is all faculty, right?
Yes, this is all faculty. So I'm not saying anything negative about the program, because I think that I've learned a lot. But that as a mom, that was really hard for me, because I realized in that moment, like, if there's a school shooting and I die, my son doesn't have a mom anymore. And so some people were like laughing, and everyone deals with hard things differently. So some people were like taking this as a joke. And that was like, it was really hard for me, because all I could think of was like, oh my gosh, what if this happened to me? Or what if this happened to my son's school? And so it's just that it feels better to be prepared, and better to feel like you're able to handle a hard situation. But it also is like really sobering when you think about what that means and what could be the outcome of that.
Columbine is less than 5 minutes from my office where I work, and
Is it
some
really?
of my I know at least one, if not two, of my patient moms were at Columbine during the shooting.
Does it still kind of resonate with the community? It's still kind of
Very
present
much
to
so.
some extent?
Very much so.
I feel like we have barely scratched the surface on the number of experiences you have probably had as an educator.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like the hits keep on coming. How do you deal with it? And if it's like alcoholism, I'll cut that out. But is there anything else
No.
that you?
It's not that yet. So
I like that you added yet.
not yet. I was just telling my husband the other day, do you know what it's like to have a 6-year-old call you a fucking bitch, and you just have to stand there? Like, do you know what that is? Do you know like what is inside of you?
Did you say 6-year-old or 6th grader? 6-year-old?
6-year-old. A 6-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's not like that happened one time, right? That's not like, oh my gosh, what? That happens. So I was in a situation where a 4th grader was spitting on me for about 45 minutes as we tried to go in and out of restraints, because he had gone with scissors at my principal. So what I have to do in those moments is think about how hard their life must be for them to even be able to do those things. And all I can tap into is empathy for them, because I have a 6.5-year-old and he doesn't even know those words. And for you to know those words, use them correctly, use them towards an adult, use them while you're standing on top of a table. Like, there's a lot of layers there that got you to that place. And I am so sorry that adults in your life did not help to give you safer boundaries. And so I just have to like channel that inside
Impressive.
of me.
So one thing that's hard for me, because I feel like for the most of the part, pediatricians in schools are usually on the same page, have the same agenda there. But once in a while, I'll hear these stories where it's usually kids with major behavioral problems, so autism, ODD, that sort of stuff there, where things have either escalated in the schools, where like law enforcement has become involved, and like the one I'm thinking of has had like multiple inpatient admissions already.
Yeah.
And now he has charges pending against him. And the school just seems to be either incapable or unwilling to try to make compromises. And there's like particularly a para with this kid that just like antagonizes the shit out of him. And it's just something where outside of like moving schools, it's just become such a problem. I don't know if you'd ever seen anything like that where the school and the parents have become almost antagonistic with each other over problems.
Yes, frequently, especially when parents, 99% of parents are doing the best they can with what they know and what they can handle. But unfortunately, some of that is not great. It's how they were parented, how their parents were parented, so they think that's great parenting. And I'm on the other side saying your child needs help, like a lot of help, and we're trying to help them. We're doing this, this, and this. All we need you to do is to give us consent to give him counseling, or give us consent to have we partner with a virtual therapy program where our kids can receive virtual therapy in school on an iPad.
That's awesome.
It's super great. But we need consent to do that, or we need consent to go forward with evaluations to see if there's a disability. So sometimes, because of their feelings about school, or about stigmas around disabilities, or stigmas around mental health and therapy, parents are like, nope. And so they are getting in the way. They don't realize this, but they're getting in the way of their child becoming more successful, being able to work through all these problems that sometimes the parents have caused. And then it becomes a battle between the school and the parents to say, like, who's right here. Like, there's two different sides. What I think that I've been able to do with most parents, even those parents who initially disagree, is, again, if I can show them that all I want is what I think is best for the kid, and I can walk them through, and I can say, especially if I can like connect it to my own child, that like lowers walls. And so if I can like, it's all, education is all about building relationships, and that's with parents too. If I can build a relationship with you so that you trust me, that maybe you don't agree with what I'm suggesting, but you trust me that maybe I know that this might help, then I can get there. I feel like I can do that with most parents. There are some parents who, because of generational trauma, because of mental illness, we just can't get through to them, and that's where it starts to feel hopeless, because I want to be like, sometimes my principal says, like, we can't save everyone, and I'm like, but that feels hopeless to me, because I don't feel like I need to save everyone, but I feel like I want to help people, and when the parents are the reasons why we can't help them, that's really hard.
Well, I hope parents that might find themselves in that situation and not realize that, listen to this and realize, put some trust in the educators. They from what you've explained, have a lot of training and experience in doing this, and hopefully they put the trust in the educators to they're there because they want to be there to help.
Right.
You know?
And coming off of the pandemic, everyone realized traumatized brains, or depressed or anxious brains, don't learn very well. So a lot of the teachers, at least in my district, all of the teachers, at least in my district, were trained extensively on social emotional learning. And because we realized, if you're thinking about the fact that you haven't eaten since yesterday morning, or you're thinking about the fact that your dad smacked your mom last night, and you witnessed all of that, your brain's not learning. And so now we're finding, like, okay, this child's not learning. Is that because there's a disability, or is that because there's so much trauma this child has witnessed that the brain, his brain is just in survival mode. He's just worried about, like, when am I going to eat? Am I safe? Do I have a place to sleep? So that has been, it has been really helpful to have so many trainings on social emotional strategies, and how to get students to acknowledge feelings, that I think that has helped to work through some of that.
I know I've talked about my personal issues with this, and I think with Ryan, in your upcoming episode, we talked about this too. I think all of us who work with kids frequently have a problem with taking our work home with us. How do you work around that?
I'll let you know when I do. So I try my very best to compartmentalize for my son. Like, I know that my son needs me as much, if not more, than kids at school need me. And so I have to, like, when I'm with him, I try my best to just be like, this is something that I can focus on later, because right now I need to be his mom, not these kids' assistant principal. So something that helps me is like identifying a time where I can worry about those things so that I can like literally take that off. Like I'm like, okay, so I can worry about this, or I can think through this after my son goes to bed. And then that gives that sometimes helps me to be like, okay, I'm not trying to not worry about this, because that's not possible sometimes, but I'm just going to worry about this at a more appropriate time, or I'm going to think through this at a more appropriate.
And I know in pediatrics, I have a feeling teaching is probably the same, where you can be a good pediatrician or a good teacher if you don't have children, but having children makes you a much, much better one. And I was joking, like, it gives you a little bit of street cred. Like if you don't have it, you can't necessarily talk from experience. And I think that also makes it hard too with the taking your work home, where I've had like really tough cases where like the kid is very close to my kid's age or looks like my kid, and something bad has happened, and I come home and it's just brutal. It makes it hard to kind of put that behind.
We had a kindergartner who he was at school with his mom for a parent-teacher conference, and he started to vomit and then fainted. And the teacher, who I think has learned better, she didn't call me until after they had left. And she was like, hey, just want to let you know this happened. I was like, okay, so 5-6-year-olds don't do that. That's not something that they do. They don't just like vomit and faint. So there's something wrong. So I had one of my Spanish-speaking staff members call the mom, and she was like, oh, he's fine. He just fell asleep. And I was like, no. Wake him up and take him to the hospital right now. So they took him to the hospital. They did a lot of tests. He was in and out. They found out he has, help me with this word, viral
Encephalitis.
Like swelling on the brain.
Those are both, yeah, swelling your brains.
Okay, swelling on the brain. Okay, so he had that, and I was looking in our system to get his mom's number right after, because I wanted to reach out to her once I found out that's what he had. And in looking at his number, or her number, I realized that he was born a week after my son. Like their birthdays were exactly a week after my son. And I just started crying. I just was like, oh my gosh. It just hit, like it was hard when I was just an educator hearing it. But then I realized like he is my son. And that was really hard to get through. But good news, he just came back to school today, or this week, and he's doing really well. But he has to go through treatments every month, but he's doing well.
Well, Kate, thank you so much for joining us. It sounds like both your son and your students are lucky to have you. So thank you for doing what you do, and your coworkers choosing that path as well. So thank you for coming on. And before we sign off, I just want to remind everybody that if you have any questions for Kate, go ahead and keep sending those emails to thebaggagepodcast@gmail.com. I'll reach out to Kate, get some answers for those, and we'll do it provide those answers on a carry-on episode. Before we sign off, Ryan, you have anything you need to plug?
Yeah, I'll be in a bunch of places. If you check my website, ryanconnorcomedy.com, going to be, it's just all over a little bit. And my special is, my new specials on Amazon Prime, as well as my my novel, The Party. And that's it.
And I'm going to plug for Adrian, I mentioned at the top, the American Veterans for Ukraine. The website's pretty easy, AmericanVeteransForUkraine.org. And its purpose is to continue to drive public support for Ukraine, to keep it on the front lines. It's near and dear to my heart, because my loved ones are directly affected by that, because they're Adrian's wife and his in-laws. So a very important cause.
Kate, thank you for doing this. I know it takes a lot to come on and share these experiences, and you work in a tough field, so really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. All
right. Well, on that note, thank you, Kate, and thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. Music for Baggage provided by Quincy Ledbetter. You can find his stuff at qledbetter.com. Graphics provided by Megan Weaver. You can find her at meganweaverart.com. Special thanks to our premium members for their support. You can become a premium member by clicking subscribe in your Apple Podcast app or by visiting thebaggagepodcast.com/support to sign up or to gift a membership to someone. A percentage of all proceeds go to charity. If you have any questions, comments, or a good story to share, please email us at thebaggagepodcast@gmail.com.